Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So before we begin, are there any leftover comments or questions that you thought you wanted to ask or say last week that didn't get said? As we know, we digest this a little at a time, and sometimes things arise as we go through the process of assimilation. Anything at all? Okay. So we'll start with this. Cosmic intelligence is what people call Lord or God or Christ or Buddha or Brahman, or what the materialists perceive as force and the agnostics as that infinite, inexpressible beyond, and we are all parts of that. This is the second idea, yet this is not sufficient. There will still be more doubts. It is very good to say there is no destruction, or it is good to say there is no destruction for any force, but all the forces and forms that we see are combinations. This form before us is a composition of several component parts, and so every force that we see is similarly composite. If you take the scientific idea of force and call it the sum total, the resultant of several forces, what becomes of your individuality? Everything that is a compound must sooner or later go back to its component parts. Whatever in this universe is the result of the combination of matter or force must sooner or later go back to its components. Whatever is the result of certain causes must die, must be destroyed. It gets broken up, dispersed, and resolved back to its components. Soul is not a force, neither is it thought. It is the manufacturer of thought, but not thought itself. It is the manufacturer of the body, but not the body. Why so? We see that the body cannot be the soul. Why not? Because it is not intelligent. A corpse is not intelligent, nor a piece of meat in a butcher's shop. What do we mean by intelligence? Reactive power. Now, let's hold that firmly in mind. What do we mean by intelligence? The ability to react. Not a corpse cannot react, but the dweller within the body, the soul, Saguna Atman, can react. And this is why Krishna says in chapter 6 of the Gita that it is the yogis, the successful yogis' pleasure to obey the Atman. The Atman, Saguna Atman, receives information and, so to speak, issues instructions. Most of us, most of the time, are ignoring that. When we are children, we know the voice of our conscience. We know it. It's just there. That is the voice of the Saguna Atman. But we're taught, not so much by words, although sometimes by words, but certainly by example. And yes, by words. For example, if you have, as a child, a friend that no one else can see, adults will often discourage you from playing with that playmate. Oh, that's just your imagination. Well, what they're saying is so very backwards. Yes, it is the imagination, but they misunderstand what is the imagination, and they misunderstand what is the voice of the conscience. And so by words and by example, they teach us to suppress it. And it is a painful and troubling experience as a child, particularly if you are sensitive. So this ability to react does not come from the body or body-mind complex. It does not come from the citta, the body-mind complex. It comes from Saguna Atman, which, as I said, as a child, many of us knew as the voice of our conscience. Any comments or questions about this very important point and what has been said about it?
So many times, like my son or his friends, they make up stories. Like they watch a movie, they make up stories from that. That is not what we are talking from that.
You mean children make up stories?
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. They're to be encouraged in this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Let them make up stories. Let them use their imagination. Let their imagination go completely free, not their behavior. If they act out things that are violent or inappropriate, of course that has to be curbed.
Yeah.
But if they make up stories, I mean, the very first thing that I wrote seriously was a knockoff of Antoine Saint-Exupéry's Wind, Sand, and Stars, the book. It wasn't any good, of course, but it was my imagination of a story similar to his, just exactly what you're saying. I was 12 years old or 13. So fortunately, at that time, I was being homeschooled. And so I was left alone for hours and hours and hours to read and dream and imagine on my own. Children should be allowed that luxury. Aldous Huxley, in his book Island, says that the very first thing we should teach children is not anything about reading, writing, and arithmetic, that kind of thing. Teach them about their imagination and the power of their imagination. Then the second thing that they should be offered is the power of cooperation, so that they can imagine things, and then they learn the power of cooperation. So if it's something they've imagined something bigger than they can do by themselves, they see the power of cooperation. Now this is somewhat mirrored in the Montessori schools and some other schools. But in most education, starting with pre-K, it's all this learn how to be a drone kind of thing.
Yes. There's somebody at my door. I'm sorry. I need to get that. Nobody's home.
Anything else from anyone? Thank you, Somesh.
Yes, Brother Shankara, talking
Yes.
about.
Please speak up a little bit, Swayam.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, talking about the voice of conscience in children, it's so interesting to watch that sometimes they have no hesitation in telling their parents that, if parents are telling something that's not quite true, but
Yes.
no, mom, you didn't say that, or you didn't do that.
Exactly.
And then
And what happens? They get scolded.
Yes.
They get yes, you're so right, Swayam. Yes. You exactly nailed it. Anything else? Thank you, Swayam. That's exactly right.
I also wanted to read this quote from Sadhguru. He
Please.
said, learning per se is always liberating. What is frustrating is when it is imposed.
Yes. Yes. Imposition. But, it is our karma. The divine never imposes. Never, ever. It always invites. Human beings and other beings impose. What do we mean by intelligence? Reactive power. We want to go a little more deeply into this. Here is a picture. I see it. How? Rays of light from the picture enter my eyes and make a picture in my retina, which is carried to the brain. Yet there is no vision. What the physiologists call the sensory nerves carry this impression inwards. But up to this, there is no reaction. The nerve centers in the brain, the nerve center in the brain carries the impression to the mind, and the mind reacts. And as soon as there is a reaction, comes the picture. As soon as the reaction comes, the picture flashes before the mind. Take a more commonplace example. Suppose you are listening to me intently, and a mosquito is sitting on the tip of your nose and giving you that pleasant sensation which mosquitoes can give. But you are so intent on hearing me that you do not feel the mosquito at all. What has happened? The mosquito has bitten a certain part of your skin, and certain nerves are there. They have carried a certain sensation to the brain, and the impression is there, but the mind, being otherwise occupied, does not react. So you are not aware of the presence of the mosquito. When a new impression comes, when a new impression comes, if the mind does not react, we shall not be conscious of it. But when the reaction comes, we feel, we see, we hear, and so forth. When the reaction comes, we see, we hear, we feel, and so forth. With this reaction comes illumination, as the Sankhya philosophers call it. We see that the body cannot illuminate because in the absence of attention, no sensation is possible. Cases have been known where under peculiar conditions, a man who had never learnt a particular language was found able to speak it. Subsequent inquiries proved that the man had, when a child, lived among people who spoke that language, and the impressions were left in his brain. These impressions remained stored up there until, through some cause, the mind reacted and illumination came, and then the man was able to speak the language. This shows that the mind alone is not sufficient, that the mind itself is an instrument in the hands of someone. In the case of that body mind, and in the case of that boy, the mind contained that language. Yet he did not know it, but later there came a time when he did. It shows that there is someone besides the mind. And when the boy was a baby, that someone did not use that power, but when the boy grew up, he took advantage of it and used it. First, here is the body. Second, the mind, or instrument of thought. And third, behind this mind, the self of man. The Sanskrit word is Atman. That's what I was speaking about earlier. This that reacts is Atman, the Saguna Atman. As modern philosophers have identified thought with molecular changes in the brain, they do not know how to explain such a case, and they generally deny it. The mind is intimately connected with the brain, which dies every time the body changes. Isn't that a startling thing? The mind is ultimately connected with the brain, which dies every time the body changes. The self is the illuminator, and the mind is the instrument in its hands. And through that instrument, it gets hold of the external instrument, and thus comes perception. The external instruments get hold of the impressions and carry them to the organs. For you must remember always that the eyes and ears are only receivers. It is the internal organs, the brain centers, which are in Sanskrit. These centers are called indriyas, and they carry sensations to the mind, and the mind presents them further back to another state of the mind, which in Sanskrit is called chitta. And there they are organized into will, and all these present them to the King of Kings inside, the ruler on his throne, the self of man, the Atman. He then sees and gives his orders. Now, if you want to know more about this particular little aspect right here, it's discussed by Sri Krishna in chapter 6 of the Gita. Particularly this business about giving orders. Then the mind immediately acts on the organs, and the organs on the external body. When he means the organs, we have 5 organs of perception and 5 organs of action. And so this is what he's talking about. The real perceiver, the real ruler, the governor, the creator, the manipulator of all this is the self of man. We see then that the self of man is not the body, neither is it thought. It cannot be a compound. Why not? Because everything that is a compound can be seen or imagined. Everything that is a compound can be seen or imagined. In other words, either actually perceived or conceptualized. That which we cannot imagine or perceive, which we cannot bind together, is not force or matter, cause or effect, and cannot be a compound. The domain of compounds is only so far as our material universe, our thought universe extends. Beyond this, it does not hold good. It is as far as law reigns. And if there is anything beyond law, it cannot be a compound at all. The self of man, being beyond the law of causation, is not a compound. It is ever free and is the ruler of everything that is within law. It will never die, because death means going back to the component parts, and that which was never a compound can never die. It is sheer nonsense to say it dies. We are now treading on finer and finer ground, and some of you perhaps will be frightened. We have seen that this self, being beyond the little universe of matter and force and thought, is a simple, is that the word? Is a simple. And as a simple, it cannot die. In other words, it is not complex. It's simple. That which does not die cannot live, for life and death are the obverse and reverse of the same coin. Life is another name for death, and death for life. One particular mode of manifestation is what we call life. Another particular mode of manifestation of the same thing is what we call death. When the wave rises on the when the wave rises on the top, it is life, and when it falls into the hollow, it is death. If anything is beyond death, we naturally see it. If anything is beyond death, we naturally see it must also be beyond life. Before we go on much further, I want to see if there are any comments or questions about what's been said. Anything from your own wisdom, anything from your own experience or that you'd like to share, or any concern or question?
Shankar, Sumesh here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've asked before, and it's rising again, that so who takes the decision? Is it the mind or the self?
The
Or
self.
the self. Every decision, whether I'm going to eat this.
Well, now that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Were you finished with your question?
Yes, I am finished.
Okay. Because we have this smaller self, the self that I've been talking about here is capital S self, or Saguna Atman. If we, in our egoistic way, self-centered way, ignore the directions, the urgings of the Saguna Atman, the self, then we'll do otherwise. And it is when we identify with the body and the mind, that when we think that's what we are, that's when we act willfully and ignore the voice of conscience or Saguna Atman, the self. And so this is how we generate karma. This is how we generate what we're now experiencing. We generated what we're now experiencing as our prarabdha karma. That which we generated in some other form out of egoism. So the Atman is ever present, ever awake, in waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, ever awake, and ever reacting. And you can see that even in deep sleep, unconsciousness we call it. You see there are brainwaves. So this is the evidence of the Atman's presence reacting. As I say, if you want to understand more fully this nexus of the self or Atman and the body-mind complex, and how we manage to ignore the Atman, read chapter 6 of the Gita. And I strongly suggest, as always, that you read first, and not the only, but you read first Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood's translation, because they make it so simple. It's not scholarly or academic. There's very little commentary, some footnotes here and there to explain particularly difficult concepts or Sanskrit words that can't be really translated. But they made their best effort, and a heck of an effort it was, to try to communicate in English just exactly what Krishna said. Swami Prabhavananda himself was a Sanskrit scholar, knew Sanskrit very well, and was also a Shakespeare scholar. So he knew elegant English. And he knew he really treasured English because he said English has so many synonyms because it's polyglot. It's assembled from so many other languages. There are so many synonyms with fine shades of meaning. And then Christopher Isherwood was himself a internationally renowned writer, novelist, short story writer, essayist. And so he helped Swami Prabhavananda very, very much. They were dear friends. So I suggest reading chapter 6 of the Gita to understand how the Atman is there and why it is that we manage to ignore it, and what happens if we don't ignore it, which of course is a very different way of being alive when we don't ignore the Atman, which is constantly reacting, constantly trying to optimize your experience, constantly trying to optimize your experience. It's when we think we know better that we get ourselves into trouble. Oftentimes, we don't even hear, because as I say, the divine never imposes, always suggests or invites. And Krishna is very eloquent about it in chapter 6.
So if I put in my words, of course, reading Gita is one thing, but what I understood is that, I take example that I see some sweet, okay, and in my mind, my mind says, okay, eat it. It's sweet. It's nice. And but I'm taking a very simple example. But there is a self, capital self. It might be saying something that maybe not to eat it, or maybe to eat it, or like saying something. But I tend to ignore that and listen to my mind and to take a decision based on that. Whatever my mind, like, it gives pros and cons at the time, and then I take one decision either way, but never be.
Let's substitute the word ego for mind.
Okay, yes. Ego.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we listen to our ego, which is a compound, it's a compound of our past experiences that convince us that we must be self-centered and selfish and please ourselves and grasp pleasure from our looking outward. The sweets is a very good example.
In fact, when you said ego, the thing that came to my mind is somebody says something that I find insulting to me. And then it's still ego that I let it go or don't hold on to it. Like, because of my ego, I may not say anything, I may not do, but I still hold on to it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's all ego.
That's all ego. And as Swami Vivekananda points out in Song of the Sannyasin, praiser praised and blamer blamed are one.
And that's what is
so when someone says something to you that seems to you insulting or degrading or it doesn't take you seriously enough, Just remember all that has happened as my upadhis have been ruffled. My upadhi, my self concept, small s self concept, has been ruffled. How dare they talk to me that way? But if you just let it go, if you just remind yourself, praise or praised, and blame or blamed are one.
Mhm.
It's just some noise. It doesn't have anything to do with the you of you. The you of you and the you of the person who made this insulting or degrading remark is the same you.
Mm.
And their ego to make such a remark has ruffled your ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
And any therapist will tell you that what they've done is they've just projected their own afflictions, their own inability to cope. They've projected it on you. Somehow they are lacking in an ability to cope. So they take it out on you, as it were.
Mhm.
And it means nothing. It's just some sound waves.
Mhm.
It only means anything if you allow it to.
Yes. And in fact, sometimes, it's like if my wife asks me a simple question, hey, did you put the dishes in the dishwasher? It's not that she's insulting me or anything, but to me it sounds like, look, you don't think I do the work? Like, my mind triggers me to feel like she's questioning me, or like
Oh yes.
she's doubting me or something. So that,
Well, this is the most difficult relationship that human beings have. Is a marriage, because usually we get married when we're young
Mhm.
and very ignorant. And so some habit patterns of relating to one another get established. And as those habit patterns, unless you actively work to dispel them as you mature, they result in exactly what you just talked about. And so just think, oh, wait a minute, when you have this reaction, wait a minute, this is just old baggage. This is just this stuff that comes from when we were young together and didn't know any better than to be stupid with one another. It's not that we were bad. We were just, I was married for 47 years to the same woman. We got married when we were very young. Oh, were we absolutely ignorant. We were still children. Our prefrontal cortex hadn't even formed yet. So it's marriage is it's very hard to craft a successful marriage, and it's a great tribute to those people who do it, as you must have. You're still married,
Yes.
so you managed to get past many bumps in the road.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Isn't it interesting how this subject of reaction and reactivity creates conversation? Anything else from anyone?
Yes, Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
So I'm reading the Sri Ramakrishna and his divine play, and there is one incident there where it describes where Swami Vivekananda had asked Swami Sharadananda to run some errand, and it didn't get done, and so Swamiji was very angry and um, kind of berated Swami Saradananda, but apparently Swami Saradananda just didn't react, maintained his cool, and when Swamiji stopped speaking, he asked him, like, do you want a cup of tea or do you want water? And the Swamiji remarked that he laughed and said, Charat has blood of fish in his veins or something like that.
He has no what?
Blood of fish. So my question was that Swami, and it says that Swami Saradananda was always like that, very even tempered. He never lost his temper. He was loving to everybody. So was that part of his personality, or because he was spiritually evolved, or both?
Well, it was because he was spiritually evolved that he had the personality that he had. Swamiji had a hot temper. There's no two ways about it. I mean, and he himself admitted it, and admitted that it was a two-edged sword. You know, Swamiji just had a hot temper. Another example, Swami Vivekananda was saying something, and the two people listening to him were Swami Vijnanananda and Swami Premananda. And Swamiji was saying something about the Vedas. And Vijnanananda, who was much younger, but prided himself on his scholarship, contradicted Vivekananda. And Swamiji began to get red in the face, and he was about to explode. And Premananda said, "Oh, Swamiji, why get angry? This is just a boy. What does he know?" And that's all it took. That's all it took. Just that one little remark for Swamiji to listen to the Atman rather than to his upadhis. And so he just right away calmed down. He said, "Oh yes, you're right, Babaram. He's just a boy. Why should I take him seriously?" So it isn't that the saints never get angry. Saint Joan of Arc, she had a fiery temper. You know, she was really something. The Maid of Orleans that led the army that freed the French from the English at one time. So reactivity. But the key point is, who are you, and how to listen to the you of you, which, if you do, transforms your life, and you stop creating karma. As I say, it's explained very nicely by Sri Krishna in chapter 6 of the Gita. Anything else from anyone?
Just what does the blood of fish refer to? I mean,
I have no idea. Oh, cold blood. Cold-blooded, non-reactive.
Okay.
There's another little story like this. At one time, before he was posted to Portland, Swami Aseshananda was at the Trabuco Monastery in Southern California. And Swami Prabhavananda would come and go on his schedule. And one morning at breakfast, Swami Prabhavananda also had a temper. And something that Aseshananda did or said, I've forgotten what it was, inflamed Swami Prabhavananda. And Swami Prabhavananda just roared and had at him for, some time. And Seshananda just sat there. And at the end of it, he just nodded and asked if he could be excused from the table and got up and left. And Swami Prabhavananda just laughed and said, "What can I do with him? He has no ego." There were just no upadhis to ruffle. What can I do with him? He has no ego.
So, Brother Shankara,
Yes.
what's difference between us and the Swamis who get angry? Is it that how often it happens and for how long you stay like this? Or
They don't hold on to it, Samesh.
yeah.
It just flares up. It's like a Roman candle. You light a Roman candle, it goes whoosh, and then it's just over with. There's nothing left but just this little shell.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. And it's as if it never happened. I mean, they don't refer to it again. They don't. It just happens and it's gone. They don't hold on to it. I mean, I've seen it in the Swamis. I saw it in Swami Prabhavananda. I saw it in Swami Swahananda. I've seen it in Swami Chetanananda.
The life is this moment, not anything.
And though I've never seen it in him, Yogatmananda, I was praising Yogatmananda one time for his even-temperedness. He said, "Well, you don't see me at home." He said, the devotees there will tell you a different story. So, the difference between saints and us is just a matter of degree. They have less ignorance than us. But even the sages, even the greatest sages, here's a story about Rama and Vashishta. Vashishta, of course, was Sri Rama's teacher and counselor. And at one time, after Rama was grown, and Vashishta's sons all died. I don't remember how it was they all died. But he was absolutely beside himself. He was disconsolate. He was weeping. He was, just completely consumed by grief. And Lakshmana said to Rama, "Rama, this is the man that told you the world is totally illusory. There's nothing here but vibration. This is how can he be behaving this way?" And Rama said, "Oh, my brother, you must remember, he who has wisdom also has ignorance, as long as we're embodied. We have our ignorance. So even the saints and sages, something will overwhelm their ability to listen to the Atman in that moment. Ignorance. And it's just ignorance.
Yeah.
And it's said over and over in various scriptures. The only difference between those beings and us is our level of ignorance. And as we grow, our level of ignorance lessens, it dispels. And that's what the 4 yogas are all about. They're all practices and principles and practices for dispelling our ignorance. Nothing more. It's not like they're anything more than that. Sure, they're wonderful, and they're graceful, and they're full of wisdom and so on. But they're just tools to uncover, for us to uncover the truth of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we must never feel bad about ourselves for being ignorant. It comes with the package. Anyone else? Anything?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
also, is it possible that the outbursts or the anger of the Swamis or sages is more unselfish, maybe for the good of the student or
Well,
organization or something?
this is what we are to assume. That yes, and sometimes later there's a wink and a nudge, and you can see it was a performance. But yes, exactly what you said, Swayam. We are to assume that it is for our own good, which is sometimes very difficult in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you still have upadhis, and we have our upadhis.
Yeah. Sometimes, like I get angry at my son without my control, but sometimes I just show anger because that makes him get to school and do some homework. So I think it's the same way for like, are they getting anger for the good of the whomever it is, or it is they are out of their own control? Yeah.
Well, however we behave, the more intentional it is, the more productive it will be. When we are intentional rather than careless, or just barreling along and doing what comes next.
Shankara, Brahmadas has his virtual hand up for quite some time. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Brahmadasi. You just have to break in, dear. I can't see. You know that?
So my hand keeps raising for some reason. I don't know why. So I have to keep lowering it.
Did you have a question, dear?
No, I did not have a question. My hand just keeps raising in this meeting. I'm not sure why. It's a technical glitch.
Well, it was good of Somesh to notice. And it's good to hear your voice. Just a little more of Swamiji. I must remind you of the first conclusion, that the soul of man is part of the cosmic energy that exists, which is God. I'll repeat that. I must remind you of the first conclusion, that the soul of man is part of the cosmic energy that exists, which is God. We now find that it is beyond life and death. You were never born, the you of you, the Atman, which is both Nirguna and Saguna. You were never born, and you will never die. What is this birth and death that we see around us? This belongs to the body only, because the soul is omnipresent. Now just think of that. This is what you uncover and discover. The fact that you are omnipresent, omniscient, and, for that matter, omnipotent. According to the scriptures, the only thing that you cannot do With your omnipotence, it is reserved to Ishvara, and Ishvari is create and destroy the universe. You can, with your omnipotence, help to sustain the universe, be part of the Vishnu energy, which is, of course, why the incarnations and their Ishvara Kotis and other followers come to earth. What is this birth and death that we see around us? This belongs to the body only, because the soul is omnipresent. How can that be, you may ask? So many people are sitting here, and you say the soul is omnipresent? What is there, I ask, to limit anything that is beyond law, beyond causation? This glass is limited. It is not omnipresent because the surrounding matter forces it to take that form, does not allow it to expand. It is conditioned. It is conditioned by everything around it and is therefore limited. But that which is beyond law, where there is nothing to act upon it, how can that be limited? It must be omnipresent. You are everywhere in the universe. How is it then that I am born and I am going to die and all that? That is the talk of ignorance, hallucination of the brain. You are everywhere in the universe. How is it then that I am born and I am going to die and all that? That is the talk of ignorance, hallucination of the brain. You are neither born nor will you die. You have neither birth nor will you have rebirth or life nor incarnation nor anything. What do you mean by coming and going? All shadow nonsense. You are everywhere. Then what is this coming and going? It is the incarnation produced by the change of this fine. It is the hallucination produced by the change of this fine body, which you call the mind. That is going on. Just a little speck of cloud passing before the sky. And as it moves on and on, it may create the delusion that the sky moves. All right. It's 9 o'clock. So I want to ask before we close if there are any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share or any concern you'd like to raise about these very startling statements that Swamiji is making.
I just want to ask you which page we were reading, the page that we are.
Can someone tell her, Maria, what page we were reading?
264, Maria.
Huh?
264, 264.
Okay, thank you.
We just finished there.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Very interesting.
Brother Shankara, this is
Yes,
my mom.
dear.
Swami gave us so much jnana through these pages, so much
Yes.
jnana.
Yes.
Definitely, definitely. He revealed to us through meditation that we will find our God within us. That
Yes.
is the jnana has been revealed so many times in all these yogas.
But you know, it's interesting. We think that, that there's something that this isn't in other traditions. But in Christianity, Christ said, I am the vine and ye are the branches. Now, Christ had that power of omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, clearly, and was rooted in the inexpressible one. That vine was rooted in the inexpressible one behind. And so he said, I am the vine, ye are the branches. The vine and the branches are the same. They are one and the same thing. And so all that Christ had, he could share. And that's why he said, ask and ye shall receive. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. All wisdom and all righteousness. Righteousness. All jnana, all wisdom, all knowledge, and all dharma. Sarva dharma. You will become sarva dharma swarupini. So this is the truth as it is spoken in Christianity. But it isn't much taught because it isn't much understood by the people who are responsible for teaching it.
I always heard growing up, the God is within you, but they never showed the path how to get there. That's the meditation. That's what we have been finding out last couple of years, reading all these yogas. Everything led to our Atman. That's where God is outside, inside, everywhere, but he's inside you too. The kingdom of God is within you.
You are that. You are that.
Yes.
That's
Exactly.
what I had exactly the same experience. I was raised a Methodist, and I had exactly the same experience. They told me all about God, but they did not tell me anything about how to know God.
How to get there? Yes, exactly.
So this is why I found my way.
Yes.
To ultimately to this Ramakrishna. Swami Prabhavananda drew me to him. It wasn't that I found Swami Prabhavananda. I was praying for a teacher, but he drew me to him. But that was the life transforming moment when I encountered Swami P. And if you pray as I did, you too. Well, this is the promise over and over. If you sincerely desire a teacher, that teacher will appear. And they may not be embodied. Swami Vivekananda was no longer in the body when he taught Sri Aurobindo, and he wasn't in the body when he taught the man who became Swami Ashokananda. So but just if you sincerely desire to have someone who is your teacher and your very own, just pray. Pray relentlessly.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. It's wonderful.
But you're absolutely right, Haima. Growing up, they told us that God is this, God is that, God is everywhere, God is
He's within you, and
God to know that.
Yeah, and then people go to temples and pray and then do the evil things coming out of the temple, and they just don't know the path to find their own God. Well, it's right there within them. When you are watching, God is watching. Whatever you're doing, God is watching you. That truth is not told to many people because they think they can just be sneaky and do things. But God is watching.
We mustn't judge, though, dear.
Sure.
We mustn't judge. We mustn't think that they're bad. No. I mean, we have to curb their antisocial behavior.
Ignorance.
They're bad.
It's ignorance.
It's just a matter of ignorance.
We're all ignorant in some level, at some level. Thank you, Brother Shankara. Wonderful Jnana Yoga.
Anything else from anyone before we close?
Brother Shankara, you said it very well when you said that in Christianity, the people are not able to explain, whatever they're supposed to because they are not able to. And this is pretty much with all religions, is that at core, all the principles are same. And I'm sure if you really look around, there are so many spiritually evolved people. Just to come back to what Haimaji was saying, there is no, most of the time, people are full of hot air. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that, but being born and brought up in India, we are all full of hot air that Hinduism has everything in it, but it's not. The more we start going deeper into our own consciousness, our understanding changes so much, and we can see people from different backgrounds following no spiritual lineages, but they are so advanced. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm very lucky to be here so I can see around. But like we said, it's very unfortunate that, and yes, the credit goes to Hinduism. And like Swamiji said, there were so many people in India who took it very seriously, and all the saints and the rishis took effort, and it was all documented. And that's why probably, we have a little better, chance of looking at it. But yeah, I mean, it's what you said was right, that it needs to be.
Well, thank you. And what you just said was very well said, Shailesh. These, it's so hard to be patient and persevering and to seek the Atman. But, if we believe in the Atman, if we stick with the ideas leading to the Atman and seek the Atman, we are told over and over by teacher after teacher, Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna, the direct disciples one after another, we will find. We will find. It's there within us. It's there within your heart. It is only to be uncovered. So if there's nothing else.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
So I was listening to a talk today, and part of the talk was about the 3 states, and it really appealed to me that just like when we dream all sorts of bizarre things, and then when we wake up and realize that it's a dream, and what we are seeing in our so-called awake state, world is also bizarre. So it's all a dream of Brahman, which you have said many times. And I think it's hard to discount that. The problem is to reconcile that we are that Brahman.
Well, this is to be uncovered. This truth is to be uncovered. And that's why we do the spiritual work. Yes, this waking state is also a dream. as Swami Vivekananda said, we are infinite dreamers dreaming finite dreams. And the reason that this dream is so compelling is that it is Brahman's dream. It is so convincing because it is Brahman's dream. And in this time, in this Iron Age, this Kali Yuga, it is particularly bizarre because there is no Dharma left. The bull of Dharma has not one leg left to stand on. So everything is upside down. But this is when it's important for us to remember this great teaching of the Lakota elders, the Native American people. This great teaching of the Lakota elders. You were born for this time. What does that mean? If you are oriented as the way we are oriented, these wonderful people who gathered here this evening, it is for us to be radiant, for us to shed light in this darkness, for us to be kind when others are cruel, for us to be loving when others show hatred, for us to be compassionate when others are callous. You were born for this time, to be part of the solution, to be part of the solution, to be part of the transition to the golden age. So this is why this gathering that we have is such a treasure, because it nurtures us in this ability to be what we be our best selves. So thank you, Swayam. Anything else from anyone?
All I really know about the Lakota Indians is from what I saw watching, was it Dances with Wolves, the true story of John Dunbar, a Civil War veteran who befriends the Lakota Indians. And it seems like they were pretty kind, like they had adopted a white girl whose parents were killed, and then they actually allowed this white man into their tribe. And
yes.
That's just my impression of the Lakotas.
Yes, the Lakota and the Dakota people who live in the area between the United States and Canada that we call the Dakotas, that area. Well, like all of the Native American peoples, the best of their lands were taken from them. But that's all part of the greater karma story, which is impenetrable to us. So anything else from anyone? Thank you, Brahmadas. It's good to get that affirmation of the Lakota. All right. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Abir Moiti. Oh, dearly beloved Lord, lead us from this realm of confusion to thine abode of clarity and wisdom. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence. Om Hari Om. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Durga Durga Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So until Saturday, for those of you who wish to join us, and then on Sunday there will be a talk on Bhakti. I'm still deciding what aspect of Bhakti to talk about. I've had lots of doctor's appointments, and though it's good though, because there's this huge rescue team that is working to keep this unit functional. A heart rescue team and a gastrointestinal rescue team. It's awesome how these people in that care industry are doing so very sweetly and well. So until next time, you'll get a newsletter tomorrow that says what it is that we're going to talk about. Any final word from anyone? All right, dear. Talk with you again soon. Much love all around. Until next time.
Thank you.
Good night, dears.
Bye-bye.